1830, only a few miles from what is now the great city of Cincinnati, there lay a vast and nearly level region of forest. In the center of a small clearing stood a cabin of hewed logs with one door and a single small window, squarely set in the rear wall. That window was boarded up. No one could remember a time when it was not. The man who lived there called himself Silas Murdoch, though most knew him only as Murlock. He was about 50 years old, tall, spare, and of a melancholy cast of features. His long, unkempt hair and beard were gray. He lived alone, hunted for food, and seldom spoke to the scattered settlers that sometimes passed that way. Years before, Murlock had been young, and he had loved a woman. They were married, and for a time they were happy in that lonely place. Then, suddenly, without warning, she sickened and died. There was no physician within 50 miles. In 3 days, she was dead. Murlock prepared her body for burial with his own hands. He washed and dressed her in her wedding gown, laid her upon a table in a single room, and then sat beside her through the night, silent and motionless, his chin upon his breast. Night fell. The storm that had muttered all day had now broke with fury. Rain lashed on the roof. Thunder shook the forest. Lightning hit the room in sudden ghastly flashes. In the fitful illumination, Murlock saw upon a woman's white face a look of such terror as he had never seen in his life. He sprang to his feet, swaying for a moment like a drunken man. Then he heard, or thought he heard, a low, dull, rapid sound. Panther, 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 as though the animal were gently beating its tail against the front door. The door was ajar. He had left it so for air. In the flashes of lightning, he saw, crouched upon the floor near the table, a great black panther. Its tail stiffly moving from side to side, its eyes shining like twin balls of fire. Murlock seized the loaded rifle that stood in the corner, raised it to his shoulder, and fired. The flash in the report filled the cabin like an explosion. When the smoke cleared, the panther was gone, vanished through the open door. Murlock stumbled forward. Between the dead woman's shoulders and neck were deep claw marks. The white throat was torn. A piece of the panther's ear lay upon the floor, beside a single drop of blood. Then Murlock understood. In the darkness, and in his grief, he had not known that his wife's illness had left her in a long coma, not death. She had awakened while he sat motionless beside her, risen from the table, and fallen dead, this time truly dead. Upon the floor, the panther, drawn by the open door, had sprung upon the body. Murlock never removed the boards from the window. He lived on in the cabin until he, too, was found dead one day, sitting in his chair, his chin upon his breast, as he had sat that awful night so many years before. And that is why, in the forest that has long since been cut away, the little cabin stood with its one small window tightly boarded from the inside, as it stands in memory still. Two friends, our unnamed narrator and his practical Swedish companion, are canoeing down the Danube in late summer. They're experienced outdoorsmen, chasing the raw edge of nature. After days of golden sunlight and easy currents, a sudden windstorm forces them ashore on a small shifting island in a desolate stretch of the river. Nothing but miles of reeds, endless sandbanks, and thousands of willows. Low, twisted, whispering willows that seem to crowd every inch of land. From the first night, Something is wrong. The willows never stop moving, even when the wind dies. Their branches rustle with a sound like faint voices, murmuring, sighing, watching. The island feels hollow, as if the ground itself is only a thin crust over an immense void. At dusk, the narrator sees shapes in the branches, funnels, spirals, figures that vanish when stared at directly. Otters play in the water, but their games look disturbingly like rituals. That night they hear it, a high, thin, gong-like note drifting across the water, coming from nowhere and everywhere. Footsteps circle the tent, yet leave no prints. The Swede, usually unflappable, wakes in terror and whispers the truth he's been fighting. They're outside, and they want to cross over. We're in the way. The next day, the island has changed. Their canoe is damaged, deep gouges no rock could make. One of the paddles is missing, and in the soft sand they find prints, not human, not animal, huge, shapeless depressions, as if something enormous tried to press through from the other side, and only partly succeeded. The willows close in. The river rises unnaturally, eating the island hour by hour. Reality frays. The narrator glimpses vast forms towering above the trees, beings from the outside space, ancient, patient, hungry for entry into our world. The willows are their frontier guards, or perhaps doorways. Every rustle is a warning. You do not belong here. This place is the border. Panic finally cracks the Swede. He confesses they have accidentally camped on a spot where the veil is thinnest, a place the old gods still claim. To appease them, a sacrifice is needed. In the night, he tries to offer himself, walks towards the trees with arms outstretched, smiling in dazed surrender. The narrator drags him back, half mad with terror. They huddle in the ruined tent as the wind becomes a screaming choir. Something enormous brushes the canvas, once, twice, leaving a smell of cold, open space and the stars. Dawn comes gray and exhausted. The river has taken half the island. Between the willows lies the body of a local peasant, bloated, eyes wide in horror. The real sacrifice swept downstream by chance. The beings have accepted it. The pressure lifts. The willows grow still. The two men escape in a battered canoe, never looking back. They speak of it only once more years later, in a quiet voice. Death, you know, is not the worst that can happen. There are other forces, some places where the skin of the world is very, very thin. And even now, whenever the wind moves through willow trees, both men, wherever they are, flinch at the sound of faint, endless whispering coming from the other side. Back in 1712, the new minister of Balwery, Reverend Murdoch Solus, was a serious, educated man who didn't mess around. He preached hard against sin and didn't care if the villagers thought he was too strict. One day, while walking in the moor, he ran into a strange, crooked old woman everybody called Crooked Janet. Her neck was twisted, her skin was dark, and she scared people just by looking at them. Solus, full of righteous fire, called her out to her face. He said she was a witch and in league with the devil. That very night, a massive storm hit the valley. Thunder, lightning, the works. The next morning, Janet was found dead at the minister's front door, neck broken, but her body still warm. The villagers were convinced the devil had come to collect her and killed her in rage when she couldn't get inside the holy man's house. Solus refused to listen to any of that talk. Pale and shaking, he picked up her corpse himself, carried it to the churchyard, and buried her with his own hands. After that day, the minister was never the same. His hair went snow white almost overnight. He barely spoke, sat staring into space for hours, and looked like a man carrying a terrible secret. And then, the craziest part. A short time later, he dug Janet's body up and hired her as a housekeeper. People swore they saw her moving around the manse after dark, neck still twisted, eyes glowing, silent as a ghost. Everyone said the minister was terrified to be alone with whatever he had brought into his house. Fast forward 7 years to a hot August evening in 1719. 2 villagers, Saunders and old Bessie, were walking past the manse at dusk when they heard awful noises inside. A low, guttural voice, speaking some language no one had recognized, and the minister screaming in pure panic, "Janet, Janet, stay away from me." Suddenly, the door flew open. There stood crooked Janet on the doorstep, black against the sky, head lolling on her broken neck, arms reaching out like she was swimming through the air. Saunders and Bessie ran for their lives. They rounded up a dozen men with lanterns and sticks. When they burst in, they found Reverend Solus collapsed in a chair, face gray, eyes bulging, barely alive, and swinging slowly from a beam in the ceiling was Janet's corpse, still wearing the same clothes she was buried in 7 years earlier. The body was still warm, the neck still snapped at an unnatural angle. The minister never recovered. He lived on for years, silent and broken, shunned by everyone. When he finally died, they buried him against the churchyard wall, as far from decent Christian graves as possible. Even now, on wild nights when the wind screams around the old manse at Balwery, people say you can hear 2 voices, one muttering and laughing in a language not of this world, and another high, desperate voice crying, "Janet, crooked Janet, the devil has me now."